It's the early hours of February 24th, 1991, somewhere in the Kuwaiti desert, west of the coastal highway. Sand hangs in the air from a night of artillery. A column of Iraqi armor sits dug into revetments, engines cold, crews waiting for an order that hasn't come in days. Then, a shape drops out of the haze. Low, slow, ugly by fighter jet standards. Twin tails, straight wings built for loitering, not speed. It doesn't scream past like a fighter. It circles. A 7-barrel cannon under the nose opens up. The sound doesn't arrive until after the damage does. A deep, ripping buzz that rolls across the sand a full second behind depleted uranium already punching through steel. One T-72 goes still, then another, a few hundred meters down the line. Nobody in that column ever gets a clean shot back. The aircraft is already banking away, low and slow enough to have seen exactly where to come from next. By the end of that week, close to 200 armored vehicles along the Kuwaiti border are wrecks. Not from an air-to-air kill, not from a stealth bomber's laser-guided bomb dropped from 6 miles up. From a plane the Air Force itself once tried to cancel. The aircraft is the A-10 Thunderbolt II. Most people call it the Warthog, and most retellings settle on one image for it: a flying gun that mowed down Iraqi tanks by the hundreds because Iraqi armor was outdated junk against American technology.
That's a lazy read of a genuinely complicated record. The T-72 wasn't junk. It was the most produced main battle tank of the late Cold War, exported to more than 40 countries, feared enough that NATO planners spent 2 decades building doctrines specifically to kill it. Iraq fielded thousands of them, dug in behind sand berms, minefields, and interlocking fields of fire. In defensive positions, Iraqi engineers had months to prepare. And the A-10 wasn't built as some inevitable tank-killing miracle. It was nearly canceled twice, mocked by its own pilots' fighter jock peers, kept alive mostly because nobody else in the Air Force wanted the job of flying slow and low over a battlefield to support soldiers on the ground. So, which is it? A brilliant weapon system finally proven right by combat? Or a lucky matchup against an enemy whose armor and air defense had already been gutted by 5 weeks of bombing before a single tank round from a Warthog ever landed? That's the question this script actually answers, and the answer isn't in the gun. It's in what happened to Iraq's tank force in the month before the ground war even started, and what 1 week of close air support did to what was left. Fairchild Republic built the A-10 around a design requirement that sounds backwards for a jet: survive being shot at from the ground, again and again, while flying slow enough to actually find and hit a tank. Everything about the airframe follows from that one demand. Twin engines mounted high and aft, shielded from ground fire. A titanium bathtub around the cockpit, thick enough to stop 23mm rounds, built to keep the pilot alive even if the airplane around him is falling apart. Redundant flight controls, so a plane that's lost half its tail or an engine can still limp home. It was never meant to dogfight. It was meant to take a hit and keep flying. At the center of the nose sits the GAU Avenger, a 7-barrel rotary cannon firing 30mm rounds at a rate that outstrips almost anything else in the American arsenal. Loaded with armor-piercing incendiary rounds using depleted uranium cores dense enough to punch through the top and rear armor of a main battle tank, the thinnest parts of a T-72's hide. On paper, that's a purpose-built tank killer, engineered from the airframe up around one gun. In practice, that same design meant the aircraft had almost no speed to escape trouble, and asked the Air Force to keep an entire logistics tail alive for a jet whose only job was loitering over the world's most dangerous real estate. Vulnerability was the trade-off, and the whole program almost died because of it. The Air Force didn't rubber stamp the concept. Development stretched through the early 1970s under intense internal skepticism. Fighter pilots and budget planners who saw a slow, unglamorous aircraft competing for funding against fast movers like the F-15 and F-16. Cancellation came up more than once in Pentagon budget reviews through the 1980s. The aircraft that survived those fights carried real scars from them. Limited to subsonic speed by design, not oversight. No advanced radar for finding targets at range. Pilots who flew it called it a flying tank, meant it as a compliment about survivability, and knew exactly how unglamorous that made them look next to the men flying interceptors. Then came Desert Storm, and the question stopped being theoretical.
Operation Desert Storm's air campaign opened on January 17, 1991, more than 5 weeks before a single Allied soldier crossed into Kuwait. That gap matters more than almost anything else in this story. Coalition aircraft spent those weeks systematically dismantling Iraq's integrated air defense network, radar sites, command bunkers, communication lines, and fuel depots, before turning attention to the armor dug in along the border. A-10 squadrons flew from forward bases inside Saudi Arabia, close enough to reach the Kuwaiti theater on short notice and loiter over target areas for extended periods, something faster jets flying from further back couldn't match. Over the following weeks, Warthog pilots refined a tactic that would define the aircraft's legacy: tank plinking, flying with infrared targeting pods to spot the heat signature of a tank's engine block against the cool desert night, then diving in with Maverick missiles or the GAU-8 itself.
By mid-February, Iraqi armor in the theater was already being ground down daily, tank by tank, in strikes most of the outside world barely noticed because there was no ground offensive yet to report on. Then came February 24th, the opening of the ground war, and with it, the week this story centers on. As Iraqi armored divisions attempted to reposition, retreat, or counterattack along and behind the Kuwaiti border, A-10s flew sortie after sortie against columns caught in the open or dug into positions coalition intelligence had already mapped in detail. Official after-action figures credit A-10 squadrons with roughly 150 confirmed tank kills during the conflict, alongside hundreds of other armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and trucks, concentrated overwhelmingly into that final week. Individual squadron logs from the period tell a more granular version of the same story. Some units reported destroying more armored vehicles in a single day than they'd expected to claim across the entire war. Pilots described Iraqi columns strung out along what would later be nicknamed the Highway of Death, vehicles abandoned or destroyed faster than assessment teams could keep an accurate count. None of that reads as a fair fight, and it wasn't meant to. This is where the record gets more complicated than the highlight reel suggests. By the time the ground war opened, a significant share of Iraq's armored force in the Kuwaiti theater had already absorbed 5 weeks of coalition air power, with no meaningful way to shoot back.
Iraqi air defense radar was largely blinded. Iraqi air power driven from the sky or bottled up on the ground. Resupply lines under constant interdiction. Crews in forward positions were, by multiple accounts, malnourished, exhausted, and in some units under strength from desertion before a shot was ever fired at them. That context doesn't erase what the A-10 did, it reframes it. The GAU-8's rounds still had to find their targets. Pilots still had to fly low, slow, and close enough to identify armor from decoys and friendly positions in a chaotic battlefield, all while remaining inside the effective range of shoulder-fired missiles and anti-aircraft artillery Iraqi units still possessed in large numbers. Several A-10s took battle damage from ground fire, a small number were lost outright. This was not a turkey shoot conducted from complete safety. What the campaign actually measured wasn't whether the A-10 could beat a T-72 in some abstract steel versus steel contest. It measured what happens when a purpose-built close air support platform gets a battlefield where the enemy's ability to shoot back has already been reduced to a fraction of its design strength, and still has to do the finding, closing, and killing in real time under real fire. Two different questions get asked when people argue about this today. Was the A-10 a genuinely superior tank-killing platform, proven in the one real war it was designed for?
Or was it a slow, vulnerable jet that only racked up those numbers because 5 weeks of precision bombing had already gutted the force it was fighting? Both questions are legitimate, and both can be true about the same week of combat without contradicting each other. Consider what the aircraft's survival inside the Pentagon actually proves. Programs the Air Force doesn't believe in get quietly retired once a war ends and budgets tighten. The A-10 faced retirement proposals for decades after Desert Storm, and every time the argument that kept it flying came from the same place: soldiers on the ground, and later pilots over Afghanistan and Iraq again in the 2000s, who wanted that specific airframe overhead when things went bad at close range. The T-72 side deserves the same precision. Iraq's T-72s weren't all downgraded export models. Some Republican Guard units operated more capable variants closer to Soviet domestic standard. Where Iraqi crews had fuel, ammunition, working communications, and functioning morale, T-72 units put up real resistance elsewhere in the ground campaign, inflicting losses on coalition armor in several documented tank-on-tank engagements, even as the broader war collapsed around them. The vehicle plinked from the air in the war's final week, and the vehicle that fought coalition M1 Abrams to a standstill in a handful of engagements, were mechanically often the same tank. What differed was everything surrounding it: air cover, fuel, resupply, morale, and command. A weapon's combat record isn't a fixed number stamped at the factory. It's a measurement taken against a specific enemy, in a specific state, under specific conditions, and changing any one of those variables can flip the verdict entirely. Go back to that column in the desert, engines cold, waiting on an order that never came. The Warthog circling overhead wasn't beating some equally postured, fully supplied, fully fueled Iraqi armored division in a fair contest of hardware. It was finishing off a force that 5 weeks of air power had already isolated, starved, and half-blinded. Then doing the remaining work with a gun built specifically for exactly that job, flown by pilots willing to come in low and slow enough to guarantee the kill. That's the irony sitting at the center of the A-10's entire Gulf War legacy. It wasn't a mythbuster that proved tank-killing jets could win wars alone. It was proof of something narrower, and in its own way more useful. That a purpose-built platform, flown by crews trained specifically for that one mission, can turn air superiority already won by other means into a devastatingly efficient kill count on the ground. The gun didn't win the war. It cashed in a check that 5 weeks of bombing had already written. If you want more of these, the machines whose legends outgrew the actual conditions that created them.
And down in the comments, was the A-10's Gulf War record proof of a genuinely superior weapon system, or proof that any competent close air support platform would have looked unstoppable against an Iraqi armored force that air power had already broken before the ground war began? Make your case.